So I'll be saying something first, and if you've got questions, I will take them. We reached the conclusion of these 2 very busy days, which I think this area, Irpinia, was very much admired as a backdrop. And when I selected this site for the summit, it's an area which I very much am attached to. I thought that this would give a cross-section of art, architecture, landscape, and small villages, which is also part of the fabric of our country. And I'm very glad to do this here. It was not a gift to a local area, but the decision on where to hold a meeting like this also depends on the assessments of people who specialize in these things. So when I thought of this, all the feasibility and the place was examined very carefully. The place was very much suited to this kind of event, and I'd say that it was very effective also in trying to provide over the year of the Italian presidency of G7, giving a positive image of our country in terms of being able to host and organize meetings like this. So my final accounts of this G7 Interior Minister Summit starts from a word of thanks to all the people who worked for the success of this ministerial meeting. I'd like to start from the police forces coordinated by the prefect of Avellino, the prefect of the fire department, and the health practitioners, the citizens of beautiful Mirabella, Eclano, and the whole of the Irpinia area, which who showed great enthusiasm and contributed to the success of the initiative. And we tried to make the event as comfortable as possible and to avoid disrupting people's normal lives. It was a great honor for me to chair this meeting with many important representatives. I'd like to thank the G7 ministers and the 8 ministers of Algeria, Libya, and the Tunisian Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, Vice President of the European Commission, Commissioner to European Affairs, representatives of international organizations who spoke all at the highest level, IOM, Interpol, UNHCR, UNODC, and they all provided very valuable inputs in our discussion. They were high-quality statements. The discussion provided a lot of very important reflections: cyberterrorism, synthetic drugs, artificial intelligence, migratory issues, combating irregular migration, and particularly combating human traffickers. These were some of the subjects we examined, and we adopted a final declaration, as is the case in these meetings, which presents common positions in all the areas we addressed. And this is a direction which represents continuity with declarations adopted at previous G7 meetings. It also presents a number of new developments, and following up the what we're tasked with by the Borgognazia meeting, we adopt an action plan indicating the main points of action to combat human trafficking in the area of terrorism in a very delicate phase. As we are experiencing, we are in favor of taking lawful measure nationally, internationally to counter the escalation of the current crisis and its possible impact on our communities. It remains a priority for us to ensure to our citizens the highest level of security possible, and this is something which we'll be doing in a coordinated manner and making use of our best resources. Yesterday, we had an equally important session where we had a video connection with Minister call from Ukraine, and we indicated our support for Ukraine. We also agreed on the importance of an exchange of information, both to identify possible terrorists who infiltrate irregular flows of migration, and also to monitor armed weapons contraband, which are two things which are linked to the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. To come back to new issues in declaration, first was financial investigation to follow the use of cryptocurrencies, which criminal organizations use increasingly to conceal their illicit profit. And another new thing is sharing strategies to prevent and counter the spread of synthetic opioids like fentanyl. As you know, this is a scourge in North America. The United States in particular is causing hundreds of thousands of victims, and it's something which sees us involved with the undertaking our maximum effort, and we have a multi-level strategy currently based on synergy between government, police forces, the health institutions, and the world of science. We also strengthened international police cooperation also to monitor narcotics trafficking, which occurs increasingly through online sales and through the dispatch of packages directly to the final consumer, which makes everything more slippery and more difficult to intercept. With regard to combating migrant trafficking and human trafficking, we all said with a single voice, despite the diversity of the institutions represented in that session, that dismantling trafficking cartels represents the priority which we have to act on forcefully, because the criminal organizations involved in this traffic are making huge profits, endangering the lives of migrants, and also infringing state laws. And at the same time, we will be working to have an impact on the causes which push people to immigrate, promoting economic development in countries of origin. There was a constant reference from our partners to the Mattei process and the Rome process, which the Meloni government decided to initiate. We want to protect the right of people not to emigrate, because everybody has to be able to build their own future in their own homeland, in a context where everybody has to be safe and prosperous, particularly for the younger generations. In the action plan, we approved the main lines of action in dealing with the migratory issue concretely and operationally. So I was glad that the discussion was not just on an analytical level, but there are also some very practical points which were raised. There are 5 pillars in which the action plan is divided. First of all, strengthening investigative and operational capabilities of police forces, also by starting joint activities with a unit specialized in migrant and human trafficking. And secondly, by strengthening international cooperation, both on the judicial and police level, and also through the sharing of good practices in order to combat the factors favoring irregular migration. Then there's the factor, there's cooperation with countries of transit and of origin, also with cooperation of the multilateral, with the agencies and fourthly, there's the development and promotion of information and awareness building campaigns, also in cooperation with international organizations. Finally, the implementation of knowledge and monitoring of flows in order to forestall the be one step ahead of trends in flows of migration. Obviously, we'll have to make use of the instruments made available by the Palermo Protocol and its instruments. Often when people forget the private law instruments which derive from this important convention 1 year ago in Palermo, We celebrated its 20th anniversary of its entry into force and recalled the far-sightedness of this legal framework. Special attention has to be given to the virtual dimension because the services provided by migrants are increasingly made known through social media. So we have to have cooperation because the main internet providers, the main traffickers use methods increasingly which are have mafia characteristics, and so Italy, with experience in combating mafia organizations, will be able to make a major contribution to this network, combating human trafficking. I think that together we'll be able to follow up on all our commitments today. I thank you for your attention. Thank you for having come here. And this place, which I'm very proud of, also because it's a place in my area of origin. Thank you. So I'll be very glad to take any questions.
Grazie a tutti I giornalisti.
I'd like to thank all the journalists for collaborating in these 2 days. We have a long list of journalists. Lorenzo from Il Mattino. We'll start with you.
Buongiorno, Ministro.
Good morning, Minister. You said that this G7 was celebrated at a particular time on account of the international crises that are shaking our world today. Could you maybe briefly tell us whether there were some aspects that you could have been done more about during these sessions, and what do you expect in terms of fighting illegal immigration, combating illegal migration flows? What do you expect from the European Union as a gesture of, the sharing of focus and attention with Italy, since we stand on the forefront? Well, I don't want to sound overly optimistic because I've been so pleased to preside over this G7, but really I find it very difficult to say that something more could have been done than what we've done. The climate here, the atmosphere, I can tell you, I can speak based on my experience. We would have had a difficult time just a few months ago. It would not have been as easy to really adopt a position that is so shared. We, Italy, have presented an approach that goes beyond the borders of our continent. It concerns the United States, Canada, other countries that have similar problems when it comes to combating illegal migration flows. The European Commission also has suggested, and of course I don't want here to be a spokesperson for it, but it said that the dialogue that took place here was a point of reference, and we have leadership in some initiatives, regardless of the fact that today we, hold the presidency of the G7. So I don't want to sound overly optimistic, but I do think that you can find this also reflected in the public statements. New governments have been established, the UK, the French, some also that have a general stance that is not completely aligned with that of the Italian government. But nonetheless, we were all really very much on the same page as regards the UK just a few weeks ago. I personally had the honor and the pleasure of accompanying the Prime Minister of the UK at our National Coordination Centre. Even before meeting with Prime Minister Meloni, he'd asked to be introduced to the Italian model. So as I said, I don't want to overdo it, but I felt really that as an Italian minister, that I was almost the recipient of a mandate given to us to carry forward. We feel that this final session, working session with our friends from Libya, Tunisia, and Algeria was really very successful. The dialogue with France and with others brought to the fore the areas of collaboration that are bringing about results that are in the eyes before all of our eyes in terms of the decline in flows. But also, these countries have proven to be able to play this role whilst at the same time being respectful of human rights. The presence at the same table of the representatives of the UNHCR and of the IOM was really very significant. So summarizing, I repeat once again, I don't want to come across as being overly pleased and enthusiastic, but in terms of contents, really what we accomplished was tremendous. As regards the actual agenda, the items that we placed on the agenda were all very important. The issue of synthetic drugs is one that we will be grappling with for months and years to come. Problems that are occurring across the ocean will soon make their way into our continent and become very serious indeed. We also discussed cybersecurity in depth, coming up with new perspectives and innovative ideas. I don't think that we could have done more. We could not have expected more.
Dell'ANSA.
Massimo from ANSA. Hello, Minister. I'd like to go back to the migration issue, which was the topic of today's session. You presented an action plan in the final declaration. I'd like to know clearly the situation in the Middle East has an impact on migratory flows directed towards Europe, and Italy's in the final line. Two countries in the G7, Italy and the UK, have decided to allot part of the reception mechanism to third countries. Is it something which was put on the table? Is it shared, or is it something which remains restricted to the countries who propose this? Well, I can speak to you about the Italian experience, which will now be implemented in future in a little while when we have the facilities ready in Albania. I think that's what you're referring to. The Italian experience is really not destined to remain a single case. In Europe, 15 countries already undersigned a formal request to the European Commission to look at with attention to this model, with the possibility of extending it to elsewhere, and placed under the aegis of the EU's coordination. As I was saying, this is something which the current Commission has not rejected out of hand, and which will probably be assessed by the new European Commission, but it prospectively can become a real candidate for implementation. And just like to refer to the discussion we had this morning. It's a solution which everybody looks at with great interest, also because at various phases, I'm not sure whether it was the UNHCR or the European Commission representative pointed out that this is different from what the outgoing UK government had thought of with regard to Rwanda. This is not a criticism of the British government, which has entitled to develop its own policy, but it is a different type of approach, and the infrastructures in Albania, where accelerated procedures will be implemented, will be under Italian governance, because in our agreement with Albania, this will be formally Italian territory, and I'd like to stress that in those areas which will be formerly Italian territory, we are trying, as we do in Italy, to implement the European law, because expedited border procedures from countries with people from safe countries will become European law from the 1st of January 2026, when the famous regulations which encompass the new migration and asylum regulation will be implemented. So your question as to whether this is transferable, I think, is dictated by this information. It's something which has been looked at with great interest, and people are interested in looking at its concrete functioning and how it can be made use of and extended to the European Union.
Dov'è?
Grazia from La Stampa.
Buongiorno Ministro.
Good morning, Minister. I, too, would like to focus on the topic you discussed this morning, migration flows. That is, start from the countries of the G7, as you said in your introduction, engaged in a dialogue, as you did also in the past, as my colleagues are well aware, with Tunisia, Algeria, and Libya, which, however, are countries that have not really stood out for the democratic rights. So I'd like to know, what kind of collaboration can you have with these countries in spite of these difficulties and the results achieved, of which I am aware? If I may, when it comes to democratic values and they're upholding. We have to be very careful when we talk about other countries and the extent to which they adhere to them. Now, to what extent are these countries capable of protecting the human rights of migrants according to the narrative that are passed on to us is the big question. Well, my first answer today is that this morning, these countries sat at the same table with the representatives of the UNHCR and of the International Organization for Migrations. These are the two international organizations which are entrusted with presiding over and ensuring the respect of human rights at the international level. I can assure you, based on our conversations, that these countries are really making headway when it comes to enforcing actions to combat irregular migration flows, respecting human rights. We are engaging in refoulement activities in agreement with IOM and UNHCR, and they are done by organizing a repatriation process that envisages also the reintroduction or reinsertion of these persons on a voluntary basis in society. So we're doing all of this in collaboration, not only with the international organizations, but with these countries. And we do this at the European level, not only at the European level, but at the global level, at the level of the G7 countries.
Next, Sky, Simona. Good afternoon, Minister. I'd like to go back to the opening of this G7 when you talked about security and the tendency towards extremism you mentioned. And so I'd like to know whether there is any special alarm with regard to Italy, even though you said there was no alarm, but just special attention. I'd like to ask whether you identified any dangers in Italy, and with regard to crises and conflicts, have you also identified new routes of migration? Because I suppose with the escalation of the situation in the Middle East, there might be an outflow of people, and how do you intend to react to that? With regard to the first question, I can confirm that the escalation of the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians means that we have to focus growing attention on the situation, talking about the situations, whether it can feed more extremist activities. We don't. We are focusing more attention on this, but there are no intelligence or police reports which are indicating that anything special which raises alarm is occurring. But at the same time, since we want to have maximum prevention from for a year now, since the conflict broke out, we have raised our attention and oversight greatly, and we can have effects on the public order internally, because this conflict has determined radicalization of positions in our internal debate, which are legitimate positions, but in some cases we've seen actions or demonstrations being organized, which often raise concerns of possible violence. Your second question was on flows, new flows. Obviously, this is something which we discussed today, and obviously, if the scenario of the conflict should become even more serious with Israel's projection towards northwards, towards Lebanon, obviously has to be monitored very carefully, because it might happen what we've seen happen in the past, that with every war event there are escape routes followed by people trying to escape the war. So it's possible this will happen. It's not something certain yet, because we don't know even what the dimension of the conflict will be. Trying to be imaginative, if you look at the Mediterranean, particularly on the eastern side, generally flows from Lebanon have involved countries like Cyprus, much less Malta, but obviously if there are crises which were to become dramatically acute, something we're not hoping to see, there'll be certain there's a position which is shared around the table to stop the escalation of the conflict. If it were to occur, that would be a scenario which we would have to keep an eye on.
Thank you, TGR Rai. Joe. Good morning. Good morning, Minister. I'd like to take you back to your region. You've already partly answered when addressing my colleague's question. My question is that investigations in the past events have shown that Naples is often the crossroads of terrorist groups. There are parts of Campania where illegal or clandestine migration is a widespread and intense phenomenon. So the Ukrainian Minister for the Interior spoke about the possibility of the smuggling of weapons for the war. So in this respect, monitoring over the territory of Campania, is this happening? Is it there? Is it greater than it would be in other regions? No. Campania is a part of the territory that is covered by our intelligence, by our prevention forces. That covers the entire territory. So there's no special alarm over this region, nor are there conditions of a structural nature, ontological, such that Campania can be considered as an area that requires special attention. Of course, based on what you've said, there are problems aside from the spread of weapons, which all armed conflicts somehow fuel the possibility that there may be an improper use of these weapons on this territory, destined to areas of war. the phenomena of possible radicalization, of exploiting the discomfort of people to spread radicalization, phenomena that can result in terrorism. That happens more and better, of course, where there are clandestine or illegal migration flows that cause them. So these are phenomena that we address in Campania like elsewhere. So if the question is there anything in particular here in Campania that deserves special attention, the answer is no.
Adrian Kronos, Georgia. Good afternoon, Minister. George Souther from Adrian Kronos. 2 days ago, there was a young hacker who had infringed the security system of the Ministry of Justice was arrested. So the attack showed the vulnerability of the system, and you discussed cybersecurity during this summit. I'd like to know whether any new strategies were merged to be able to deal with critical infrastructures in countries more effectively. This was discussed in the very quick reference to what we have in the final declaration. We've explored this area. Cyber threats are among the most important in the future perspective, also in terms of possible development, because it's a side of crime which is fueled by technological innovations, which are always very rapid. So what was said is something very effective, which you'll agree, that and is that we have to be in the same footing as the criminal actions working in these areas. The paradigm which is adopted is that the involvement of public institutions is not enough, particularly just the law enforcement institutions and judicial institutions. We need a circular, broader alliance with research centers and the world of academia, because with television you're referring to, apart from the criminal aspect. So with regard to the case you were referring to, I've read that this person had outstanding abilities in carrying out that criminal activity. So the state and state authorities who respond to these actions have to have enough capability to do that on a broad basis. So we have to go beyond law enforcement alone. Universities and, in particular, internet providers, the major public entities which manage networks and large databases on the global level, have to cooperate with countries so that police forces, in the full respect of all the issues which are involved in this, such as privacy, should be made possible for the enforcement authorities to be able to act effectively, because all of these things are channeled through the electronic sphere. In Italy, we defined the cybernetic security perimeter after completion of the institutional architecture, which established the cyber department in the Ministry of the Interior, which was in a central unit of cybernetic security. All the institutions are adapting, and in any case, the architecture of the cybernetic security perimeter also involves reconsideration of private individuals who can and should contribute, also in terms of preparing intelligence.
Yustaf, Il Domani. Good morning, Minister. Recently, a report from the Court of Counsel of the European Union has raised doubts on EU funds towards North Africa for the management of migration flows. it seems that apparently some of these funds end up in the hands of groups that use them to violate human rights. So since we have the counterparts from Libya, Algeria, and Tunisia, have you considered the possibility of introducing a mechanism for monitoring these flows? I can tell you that most of our initiatives in support of countries such as the ones that were present here are characterized by the fact that we have an almost immediate use of these resources. We provide them with aid that we purchase, that we finance, that we buy. We manage almost directly, I would say entirely, all the monies, all the support is characterized by this type of management. And even if there were the desire to embrace a position of suspicion towards these countries, which I absolutely do not embrace, but I can tell you that that would be dispelled by the fact that we use these, we make a direct use of these or manage these resources directly. Now, of course, there are circumstances such as the ones that you mentioned that occur just about everywhere. I mean, Italy itself was involved in investigations as to how the public resources that were earmarked to help these migrants were investigated because of the suspicion of an embezzlement or an improper use of these monies, leading to a decline in the quality of the services provided. But I can tell you that almost 100% of the aid that we provide, that we give to these countries, is characterized by the direct supply of assets that are destined to step up their capacity to combat irregular traffic.
Juicy Rai News 24. Good afternoon, Minister. Concerning alarms on internal security and also concern for public order, recently there's been growing attention on the demonstrations which are planned for this week. I'm talking about the pro-Palestine demonstrations in particular. The most important ones are going to be held in Rome tomorrow. And these demonstrations were banned by the Questura Police Office for public order considerations. What I'd like to ask you is that the demonstrators have confirmed that they will turn up on the streets and they will proceed, and there are a lot of people who are expected to arrive from all over Italy. So I wanted to ask you how you intend to manage this in terms of public order. I'd like to stress that not all the organizers of the demonstrations have announced that they are going to march in any case. I don't remember the names, but there's one which is very important in defending Palestinian rights in Italy, which clearly said that they're not going to march in the streets. They accepted the considerations of the police authorities with a request to replan a demonstration which would not entail the problems which the police authorities identified. So we're planning it for next week on the 12th, because because these demonstrations are very close to the 7th of October, and also the way that they were organized, there was the risk that they would be presented as celebration of a massacre, which is not just something which we need to manage because of the intrinsic position this would represent, but also because possibly these were organized in order to trigger violence on the streets. In any case, some organizations decided they're going to march in any case. The figures are under the control of under the supervision of the police forces, and I've said that it was I consider that there's a position of principle and one which is practical. The position of principle has been taken, then we'll see what develops, and obviously any demonstration which goes against that prohibition would be automatically illegal, and then it'll be up to the police forces with the usual balance, which I fully believe in. So we'll try to confine this to a sphere of legality without them being without ensuing problems. These decisions have to be made on the ground and making use of the wisdom and the experience of the people present on the ground. So any operational decision is something which is taken after having weighed all these circumstances.
TG5. I'd like to refer to the war scenarios. How do you feel about the anti-Semitism wave that is on the rise? There have been 187 cases in Italy since October. Well, we've already addressed this point. This is one of the elements that characterizes a situation that has, of course, an implication also on public affairs. It's to do with how to handle the law and order. It's rather depressing to see how an international conflict, which can be considered, regarded from different vantage points. It's very sad to see how it brings to the fore this anti-Semitic sentiment that has never really disappeared. It's a very lethal virus that affects and characterizes our societies. You've seen recent demonstrations, recent facts against or events against persons or the Jewish community. You've seen icons being displayed, mindful of the tragedies of the past. It's most worrisome. It's something that should be addressed by historians, anthropologists. It's up to them to help us to understand how this phenomenon, that of anti-Semitism, which really has a great deal to do with the ignorance of people. There's a whole literature based almost on the model of the plot of the wise men of Zion. I mean, history has shown that these stances can be conducive of tragedies. And these are issues that are simply dismissed at times, but instead should be addressed for what they are. They are very serious, and of course they are an expression of ideas, but they're most worrisome for the repercussions they have on public safety. We will have to pay very close attention this weekend with the demonstrations that are going to take place. And it's just not just a number of demonstrations, as you were saying, but it's the way in which some of these demonstrations are conducted. It's one thing to criticize the stance of a government, the stance taken by a government towards a conflict. That's one thing, but the actual expression and demonstration of anti-Semitism is something completely different.
Alain. Good morning, Minister. On immigration, relations with France have been at times difficult. With this new government, are things changing? Is a new page being turned? And what areas are there for bilateral cooperation in the future? Well, not to contradict you, at times this is something which is ordinary, but we've had a substantial, very fruitful cooperation with the previous French government. And I can say this with Minister Darmanin, even though there were some moments in which there were differences in opinion on some points, but cooperation's always been very substantial. New government, it's very early to decide whether there'll be a different position than in the past. I was very happy that Minister Bruno Detallier decided to come here, and it was practically his first official engagement since he was appointed minister. And I also had a bilateral meeting with him where I saw that this participation of his was not just formal, but he was very convinced of the importance of being here and presenting himself as his first action and meeting with us and having an initial discussion on things to do. I believe that we have a lot of things to be done, and there are certainly the conditions without. I said to the French colleague that Italy needs France. It needs to share action in combating irregular migration, and I don't see why this should not occur. And I share with him that British colleague and the German colleague expressed the awareness that migratory flows which generate problems in our cities start from Libya, Tunisia. They go to Italy, and then they transit into France and Germany, cross the Channel, go to Britain. So I think we're all involved in a single phenomenon, and this is something which should fuel our action, not the idea that each of us can solve this problem separately and keep the problem outside our borders, something which has shown itself to be very difficult to attain. So I have great confidence in our possible cooperation with the French government. I truly trust there will be renewed cooperation in consideration of the strong role we can have working together internationally and internationally. ARD German television.
Grazie.
Thank you. Claudia Klune from the German television. Another question on migration. Since September, Germany has reinstated controls at its borders. What does the Italian government think about that? Well, there's not much I think about it in the sense that they did so because they felt that it was necessary. We did it too. I think that we did it before Germany did. We reinstated border controls on our western borders. On the border with Slovenia, I could say, I could actually quote some numbers to prove the efficacy of this measure. People who were caught in being involved in human trafficking. No, well, anyway, we did this. Nobody challenges the value of Schengen, the free circulation of people, which was temporarily suspended. We're aware of the fact that it is temporary. We absolutely intend to reinstate the situation as it was. The current scenarios, international scenarios, fuel these unlawful migration flows, and that is why it's necessary for us to do this. And probably in Germany, the same as what has happened in Italy will happen. We were able, through these measures, to step up controls and I personally went with a colleague from Slovenia. We met actually with a Croatian colleague. We've created a trilateral format to transform what the relationship in our border controls is in a sharing mechanism and joint defense of the external European border, which is that of Croatia, that we are collaborating. And so if Germany did what it did, we discussed it with the Minister Faeser, who was here. It did so because it felt it was advisable to do so, and it's absolutely in keeping with Italy.
Paolo Multichannel.
Salve Ministro. Allora,
Thank you, Minister. Among the topics addressed, there's also drug trafficking, in particular fentanyl. First, I'd like to ask you why the subject of fentanyl was selected for discussion at the G7 summit. What are the risks for Italy, and what emerged? As I was saying previously, fentanyl is a true scourge. I want to say, answering your question, this is a topic I came across last year in my visit to the United States in Washington, where I met Lisa Monaco, who's Deputy Attorney General, who's at our meeting, and Minister Mayorkas. In the United States, they have Homeland Security and the DOJ, which overlap in issues discussed at this G7. And there, I was informed of this scourge in the United States, and that there were tens of thousands of dead, the zombie drug, and the difficulty for the United States to oppose the arrival of this drug, because these are synthetic opioids, the active principle of which is contained in tiny amounts. So it's very easy to produce it in compositions which are very small in volume, and this facilitates distribution. It also can be located in some pharmaceutical preparations which are produced in other countries, and so which are often distributed under the shield of being pharmaceutical products, but can be intercepted by crime organizations who can set up a flourishing trade in illegal drugs. And in that discussion, we basically agreed with our U.S. colleagues since to put this on the agenda of the G7 meeting. So at that time when I was in Washington, we decided to put it on the G7 agenda, and I accepted that because the U.S. colleagues pointed out that many of the phenomena which we found in previous years start on one continent and then spread to others. And I hope that I'll be wrong in these expectations, but it's very, very likely that we'll be seeing this in arriving in Europe. Currently in Italy, it's only episodic, but in other countries there are bigger traces because production is very simple, and mixing this with pharmaceutical products is quite simple, so it's very difficult to break down the supply chain. We had a discussion on this, therefore, and here too the discussion concluded with sharing the consideration that law enforcement is not enough to track the use of precursors, but also substances. We need a stronger network of health institutions too. It might seem to be very straightforward thing, but it's difficult to have an effective exchange between public institutions in the various branches of society. But so a first action of awareness was taken.
Irpina TV, Nicoletta.
Buongiorno, signor.
Good morning, Mr. Minister. I'd like to come back to the local and to the location, which was a little criticized before this G7 meeting. I believe that it was a choice made also because there was a desire to shift the focus of the attentions to the internal areas of Campania and of the country. Now, what happens when the G7 is over here at Mirabella, Eclano, and what commitments do you feel that you're ready to take on in relation to the documents that 118 mayors of the Irpinia province presented you with on the first day of this G7 ministerial meeting? Well, let me just start in saying by saying what I said when I introduced the press conference. When I decided to propose Mirabella Eclano in this particular location as the venue for this ministerial meeting, I did so not out of not because I intended to do anybody any favors, but because I was truly convinced of the fact that this venue really met all the requirements, from the beauty of the landscape to the communication network that absolutely works, based on my experience, not just of the previous two G7s that I attended, but because of my previous experience with international events, having traveled worldwide where they were organized. So I was in the wake of all that. I was absolutely sure that this was the best place. The criticism that you have referred to, I'm not aware about. I mean, I saw that the entire community was really looking forward to welcoming and receiving this G7. Anyhow, everybody's free to have his or her own opinion. We can. The criticism was absolutely done away with by the actual facts. The facts. I mean, just look at what was said and what would happen. That of course denied. The facts have denied all criticism. Anyway, I was very happy about that. There's no doubt that the fact that I felt that it could be done, that it was doable, that it was feasible. The time has come to close, of course, the proceedings, and I feel very pleased by the outcome, because this is my land. This is where I come from, Irpinia. What will remain, I'm not sure, but at least it happened. Many people have had an opportunity to see this territory, what it can express, the attention it deserves, and to, as far as I'm concerned, to help it to be directly experienced, directly known. Of course, the G7 took place in a room. The rest of Mirabella Eclano was outside of that room, but nonetheless, there was enthusiastic welcome on the part of the entire community. The mayors here, of course, belong to the parties that they belong, to different parties, but they, as you said, presented me with a document which brought together. Well, they were mayors of 118 cities of different political allegiances, and yet they came together to present me with a common stance, such as, for example, the situation concerning the water crisis. I was here this summer, and I had the opportunity to experience the problem. It's surprising that a province like this one that generates water, that has quenched the thirst and has fed the food industry of entire provinces with a larger population, can experience such a crisis. We have the springs that are amongst the most productive in Italy, Avellino being one of the places. And anyway, I think that Irpinia is one of the provinces that is most rich in water, and it is considered to be the oil of the future, as we know, right? So I don't want to criticize anybody. I don't want to say anything in particular against anyone, but there has been an issue when it comes to ensuring the proper functioning of the water network. There seems to be a loss of 60% of the water along the network, such as to determine the crisis that was experienced. Now, in relation to this, a promise was made, and this has got nothing to do, of course, with the ministry. It's not closely related to what the Ministry of the Interior can do, but I have committed to somehow serve as a nexus between the local government and the national government. Also, there is a great expectation with regard to fast rail that will be introduced in the Valle de Lucida. That's just to say that sometimes criticism is expressed without really being backed up by data. Funds were earmarked for the creation of a cargo well, anyway, putting a fast rail in one place needs to be accompanied by a local plan to connect this place with the rest of the network. A connection needs to be created with the inland areas. So it's about giving young people who are born here the possibility of not having to leave in order to take part in life as it happens elsewhere. It's possible to live in beautiful places and to work in or for places that are not as beautiful and that one loves less. Well, this was done elsewhere. I've had work experiences, which I'm always grateful for, in other places where there has been where this was done for the territory. We will do the same here. I will try to help as I can. There's one other point that I have committed to following carefully because this is within the remit of my responsibilities. A concern was expressed for the relapse of some phenomena such as home thefts. Of course, we support the territory, the fact that people are leaving it. This creates a space where these phenomena can happen. There's no absolute solutions to this, but my office and I are working on an agreement with the Campania region for a project for implementing video surveillance systems, especially for the internal areas, to give law enforcement forces with the instruments that can help them to step up their monitoring of the territory. Thank you.
So thank you very much, and we have a pleasant lunch.